are you seeing other people waking up to this idea that the institutions are dead and you need to build alternate support systems, which in this case will be networks, given our network society now?
So I may not be as, I won't say, I don't think it's black pilled, but I may not be as defeatist. There is a critical mass at a critical point after which certain institutions can't be salvaged. But I mean, when you see like the banking system cutting people off for political ideologies, myself right now, seeing the political system in Canada within the institutions themselves, local municipal organizations organizing public debates and then finding ways to exclude certain parties from those debates across the country. I mean, they've certainly been poisoned. The question is whether or not there will be a swinging of the pendulum, or they're too far gone, and bankruptcy for certain institutions that are just too far gone is the only way to do it. But we've seen it over the last little while. I mean, I've seen it since I've been doing the vlogs. At first, I was not anywhere near aware of it. Then I sort of got red-pilled by my own research, seeing how the FBI, seeing how intelligence agencies are fundamentally corrupt. But I think they probably always have been. So it might not be any different now than it was then. But I've seen it. Right. I've seen it happen in real time. I've been, Dan Bongino talks about creating a parallel economic system. I see the way the forces are driving that to happen. But yeah, as far as it goes, just the network itself, if they come down on you, or if YouTube kicks you off the platform, if you have a network that's influential enough and responsive enough and engaged enough, they can make headway in terms of undoing the wrongs sometimes, or at the very least creating alternatives if the wrong will not be undone. And that's where networks like Locals comes into play in order to create this parallel economic system, parallel free speech system. But yeah, it's once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. The only question is, how far gone does any one individual think it is once they see it? Can it be salvaged? Can it be influenced? Can the Canadian political landscape possibly be salvaged from what it is right now, which is basically 4 or 5 political parties, all of whom agree with each other just to varying degrees? We'll see. And that might be the good segue into the next subject.
You read my mind there, buddy. What do you do this for a living or something? Real quick, just a shout out to Jennifer Law in the super chats. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Good to see you as always. James Lindsay just had a tweet yesterday that I loved. He said, for all of the people who are asking me, who is going to stand up? We need someone to stand up. The answer is you. You are the people. You are the person that needs to stand up. My mom, when I argue with her, she tells me, history will just work this stuff out. The pendulum will swing, whatever. And you know what? That may be true if we're studying this 200 years from now and looking back and being like, oh yeah, well, in the next 15 years, this happened, But in that intervening 15 years, there were individual human beings making change on the margin, putting themselves at risk, doing stuff. Sounds like you decided to pick up that call. Tell us what you're doing, man. Tell me how you came to this decision. Explain what it is, because I'm in America. I don't know. You guys got a king or something up there?
Not far off. It was, again, it's another one of those decisions that happens overnight but took years to come to. I'm running for Parliament as a member of Parliament for the federal Canadian elections. Canada has a parliamentary system, which means that we've got members of Parliament on the federal level elected for electoral districts spread out throughout the country. We've got 338 of them. And I went straight for the federal for whatever the reason, but it was perhaps another one of those rash decisions that you make after 2 years of having your soul crushed by what you see around you. The channel started off as a law channel. Well, it started off as a random channel. When it niched into law, I was, breaking down depositions, Alex Jones. I was rehashing old lawsuits, the McDonald's hot coffee lawsuit. Then we get locked down for going on 2 years. And then what happens? We get locked down, and then, the COVID lawsuits start flying. I start looking at the Quarantine Act, but I say, I don't want the channel to turn into a COVID channel. I mean, I want to talk about the other stuff, but the world went where it went, and it went from 2 weeks to 2 years. And I'm breaking down these lawsuits. I'm saying it doesn't make sense what we're doing. This cannot be constitutional. It can't be justified. And everyone's like, well, you do a lot of complaining. Put your money where your mouth is and maybe become, run for office. And then the other parallel reality is that, if stuff keeps getting worse and worse in Canada, I will contemplate my future in this country, but it is still my country, and I still have an obligation to try to save it before I try to flee it. So I said I'm going to run for the country before I run from the country. And that's what I'm doing. So I threw my hat in the ring in a district that has been liberal for the last 30 years, with one exception somewhere in the 80s. And, if I lose, I lose. But at the very least, I want to give a voice to a real opposition. And I want to legitimize a political party that is the only one out there standing up for actual constitutional rights that has been by and large demonized by a fundamentally corrupt system. And you talk about the corruption, Jack. It's corruption through and through. You have the federal government subsidizing mainstream media, the CBC, which is our state broadcaster, to $1 billion a year, then handing out $600 million in bailout funds to the rest of the mainstream media. So you have the mainstream media, which is literally in the bag with the government, literally living off taxpayer dollars that are being laundered through the government to subsidize their activities. They pull the line for the government, and in so doing, they sue the Conservative Party for copyright infringement. They demonize the opposition parties, People's Party of Canada, call them racist, anti-vaxxers, yada yada. And now I'm seeing the system that true opposition is up against, institutionalized corruption, leading to an uphill battle that is David versus Goliath proportions. And just ironically enough, my competitor, the liberal candidate in my riding, his name is Mark Garneau. So it literally is David versus Garneau. I'm just looking for someone to throw together a great meme of David versus Goliath with Garneau in the meme. But now this is where I'm truly becoming.
Yeah,
I'm not going to say black pilled, just red pilled to what it means when government works with the media and the state of affairs that produces, because you see how it is easy to control, manipulate, and ultimately oppress a nation once those two massive forces are working in tandem.
Well, lots to talk about what you just said there, but the first thing that just comes to mind is that even the Chinese understand that the way to control Americans, North Americans, is through the media, through American media. Even they understand that actually our version of modern war centers now around the media as the main propaganda arm for an occupying force in America, basically. And by that, I include North America as well. And so it's very clear to people on the outside. It's very clear to people who are in the biz and who are pilled in some way about the media's role as an actual weapon of war, right? An actual weapon of war here. And yet common people, regular folks, people, no slight on them, right? They're too busy. They're too busy figure this stuff out. They got to work. They're doing your life, your old life. You're 7 to 7, missing their kids, struggling to put food on the plate and make time to play catch with their son. I really feel for those folks, which is another reason why I want them to understand what's going on here. You have learned through it's been brief. It's only been a few months, right? That you've announced and have been running.
Yeah, the political run's been a few months, but I had been, again, the practice leading up to to jumping into it for the last 2 years. I'd been covering from the legal side the scandals, the political scandals, the subsidizing of the media, the effects that has. I'd been covering it, and now all of that exercise has built the muscles that I needed for this particular leg of the race.
It's weird when you see these crazy things happen and you're like, that can't really be real. And then you do research and you figure it out, it's real. And then you're like, that's got to be an isolated incident. And then the next one, you're like, oh, that's a coincidence. And like not before too long, it takes a while to come face to face with these things that shatter your reality. Like I didn't accept that radical feminism had taken over all of our institutions until I think the Kavanaugh hearings. And I was like a red pill manosphere guy talking about radical feminism, all these things. But in the back of my mind, there was maybe like a little bit of like, is this a boogeyman? Are we putting too much emphasis on this? And then, dude, when you hear Kamala Harris and the rest of them in the Senate Judiciary Committee using the language of radical feminism, and then 2 or 3 years later, Joe Biden using the mutated language of radical feminism combined with Marxism and CRT and all this to declare white supremacy the number one threat in America. Of course, everyone who's white is a white supremacist, etc. You finally have to just accept that everything is kind of screwy.
Well, it was when politicians started actually using the word birthing people. And I mean, that's, I don't know if that is what people understand by radical feminism, but
sure.
I just the bastardizing of language to a point that actually does an injustice, in my humble opinion, to an actual group of people, women. But birthing people, and they use, we see the double standard is that they use birthing people under certain circumstances, but then when it comes to the Texas abortion laws, then all of a sudden, no more birthing people. Then it's just man versus woman, and men don't have any say. Convenience, and it's an interesting thing. Like, I know your perspective is when we're looking for golf balls, sort of in the forest, and you see anything that's white looks like a golf ball. Your perspective is the radical feminism. Mine is FBI corruption. The Kavanaugh hearings. I didn't notice the radical feminism side of it to the extent it exists. I noticed the FBI corruption, that you can have politicians, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You know what you need to do. Go find us a complaint from 30 years ago and file a complaint with the FBI. And this is how we're going to weaponize all of the intelligence agencies to derail a confirmation hearing. That was what I took from it. But it's a diverse world, and everyone is taking their own lessons from these massive events. But yeah, but the birthing people it was almost like people were following orders to start using that term in the U.S., in Canada. It was weird, almost as weird as Build Back Better, where you start to seeing everybody start using the terminology coincidentally roughly at the same time.
Yeah, there's definitely signal chats out there with all of the operatives and media folks on the left getting their marching orders. There's no question about that. At the same time, I interviewed a member of the National Security Council under the Trump administration recently, and he told me that they took their marching orders from just public proclamations and public speeches. Even these are West Wing officials, as close to the president as you can possibly get, and yet they're taking their guidance off of public speeches. So, and I guess this is actually pretty typical stuff that takes place, at least in the United States government, that the president makes a speech, and then all the agencies are like, oh, well, now we got to kind of do what the boss says there. So there is coordination, but there's also a terrifying lack of coordination. And what all this says to me is your analysis, my analysis, we're both right. When you put them together, it presents just an even more terrifying picture where the corruption is on every scale, whether it's your philosophy, your ideology, your practice, the way you decide you're going to break laws and commit crimes or frame people or dishonor honorable people or just be outright malicious or terrible. So, I waver sometimes between dumb and diabolical. That's like my favorite question about these things. Are they just stupid or are they evil? And it's a combination of both, I think. It's a combination of both.
It's the pursuit of power. You can call it evil, you can call it dumb or diabolical, but it's the bottom line. It's pursuit of power, preservation of power. And it's not just the institution. It's not just that corruption has been institutionalized. It's been normalized. And that is, to me, what the most dangerous part of all of this is the Governor Whitmer kidnapping case, and whether or not it's entrapment. You have mainstream media turning entrapment into normal practice for the FBI now. They want to normalize the corruption so that people say, oh, okay, well, if that's what it takes to capture criminals, so be it. And we just have institutionalized, normalized corruption within the agencies where people say, yeah, well, I know Trump did something, so everything that they do is warranted, even if it's falsifying, renewals of FISA warrants. But no, it's deep and it's pervasive, but it's just about pursuit and preservation of power.